morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt from Studio West. And welcome to our new affiliate, Talk Radio WGSV, 1270 AM and 96.3 FM in Lake City, Alabama. It's Guntersville. We are so glad to have Guntersville join the Borg that are 471 affiliates. I'm so glad you're there. On most Tuesday, when we are lucky, Mollie Hemingway, who you know from Fox News, if you know anything, or the Federalist, joins us. Good morning, Mollie.
Good morning.
Mollie, are you familiar with the Richmond FBI office memo about radical traditional Catholics?
Yes, it's horrible what they said about targeting traditional Roman Catholics, and then when they were exposed for doing it, the top FBI headquarters said, "Oh, well, this isn't quite how we would like it, how we would like to go after people."
Well, I want to go into the memo and to the mindset of someone. The Bishop of Richmond came out and denounced it today. 20 attorney generals wrote Director Wray and said, what is going on here? And I don't want to make too much of it because I actually admire a great deal of the Bureau. They keep us safe. They're after terrorists, drug cartels, and organized crime. But there's an ideological element of stupidity in this memo. I've actually read the memo that I wonder, do you see it? And do you have a guess as to the person who wrote this? We don't know the name. We're never going to know the name. It was written on 23 January of this year. Who writes something like this?
I think that there is a much larger problem at the FBI than we would like. You know, it's common for people to say, well, there's just a few bad people who have politicized the Bureau. By and large, they do good work. But what this memo shows, you know, it did not come from headquarters. It did come from one of these regional offices at Richmond. It shows that some of the stupidity and weaponization of the FBI against political opponents of Democrats runs really deep. And, you know, it's part of what we have seen with how they've gone after parents at school who are criticizing school boards for how they are poorly running their children's schools, going after pro-life activists while letting more or less much of the abortion-supporting activists run wild, going after conservative or right-wing political rioters, which people are fine with usually, but not going after anyone who who did the 2020 riots that hurt so much of the country. So this is a bigger problem nationwide with the FBI, I think.
I think it is a big problem, and I think one of the signs, and I want to get your opinion on this, the memo relies almost exclusively on the Southern Poverty Law Center list of extremist groups. And AOC last week cited the Southern Poverty Law Center in one of her exhortations to the Jim Jordan Committee, and I'll have Congressman Jordan on tomorrow. What should people know about the SPLC, Mollie Hemingway?
So the Southern Poverty Law Center is a group used by a lot of left-wing people to go after conservative groups. You know, they kind of had not awful origins of fighting racism in the South, but became basically just a hate group. You might remember several years ago, they published a map showing which Christian groups operate. And the map had the Family Research Council on it. And of course, one crazed individual used that map to go and try and murder everybody at the Family Research Council, which is a conservative Christian organization, shooting the guard on the main floor of the building who was so brave that he actually managed to save the rest of the people that this terrorist was trying to kill. But they frequently disparage conservative groups in completely ridiculous and unfair ways. They're poorly managed themselves, and they should not be used by anyone. They shouldn't be used by AOC, but they particularly shouldn't be used by a federal agency that purports to do law enforcement and decent investigation.
Now, I have a Washington Post column this morning that's gotten thousands of angry comments, and I didn't even include in it, because you only have 750 words, that the Southern Poverty Law Center is in here, and this is the basic information gap that I'm astonished by. You and I both know SPLC is not credible. It's a red flag. It doesn't mean that all left-wing agencies and activists are not credible, but the SPLC is well known and deeply, deeply understood to be not credible and completely indifferent to the truth. They go after the Alliance Defending Freedom all the time without ever, no nuance, no explanation of the good that the group does and why they support religious liberty, etc. So any memo that uses SPLC data is de facto, just it's wrong. It can't be credible. But someone in the FBI doesn't know that. The author doesn't know it. The supervising agent doesn't know it. The head of the field office doesn't know it. And when it gets to the bureau in D.C., they don't know it. How can the FBI not know that, Mollie?
I think what I worry about is that they're in such a bubble that they don't have hardly anybody who's pushing back against some of this. We learned this during the Russia collusion hoax. We would get access to some of these emails and texts that were going back between agents, and it was really apparent that they did live in a left-wing echo chamber of sorts, that they didn't have a good handle on understanding what half the country thinks. They're also particularly bad about investigating the left wing. I actually interviewed Attorney General Barr for my last book, where he talked a little bit about this, that after the 70s, after the Church Commission, the FBI just got really scared about understanding the left, and they put all their resources into, going after groups on the right that might be a problem. Conservatives don't cause them trouble when they do it. Conservatives tend to be law-abiding. They think, well, if there's a bad person on the right, we'd want to know about it. Whereas the left thought this was just too politically dangerous to have the FBI investigating their groups. So they don't do a good job of infiltrating hardly any of these left-wing groups relative to what happens on the right. And then that culture is rewarded throughout the agency. You get promoted and elevated if you're doing a good job going after the right, but they don't do a good job going after the left. This is the only thing I can think of about why anybody would use the SPLC, which is, it is kind of a hate group. And I'm glad you mentioned that they go after Alliance Defending Freedom, which is one of the winningest, civil liberties organizations out there. They just win so many cases at the Supreme Court for all Americans about religious liberty. And for some reason, the SPLC wants to destroy them. And now they get rewarded by being used by the FBI.
Well, the SPLC hates them because they defend Jack, the baker in Colorado who won't bake cakes that express messages with which his evangelical, he's not Catholic, his evangelical faith disagrees. Now, the Alliance Defending Freedom was founded by Alan Sears, who, like me, is a Catholic, and he believes deeply in religious liberty. But I want to go back to what do we do? I just talked to Bethany Mandel, and she had a very excellent point. Presidential candidates on the Republican side have got to come up with ideas for how do you fix the FBI, because we absolutely need the FBI. When I worked in justice in the early 80s, they were critical to stopping Soviet espionage. They were critical to breaking up the mob. Rudy Giuliani went up there to the Southern District of New York and they broke up the mob. They are critical to battling the cartels along with the DEA, a sister agency. We need it to work, Mollie. We need a national police, and they are the one that you will call if your child is abducted. You don't want the local Barney Fife doing the investigation. You want the FBI there. So how do we fix it? What do you think a Republican candidate for president should say? I think Christopher Wray's a fine director. I was very supportive of his being nominated. He's got a great reputation. He ran the criminal division. AUSA Luttig clerk. How do we fix it?
Well, that's nice that you like Christopher Wray, but he has overseen so many problems with the FBI, and instead of taking responsibility for them, cleaning house, letting the agents know they cannot be this way, he tends to be very defensive and protective of them, even when they're exposed as doing horrific things like the Russia collusion hoax, where they went after, the entire Republican Party with very bad pretext. And so you even saw in the last year or so, after all that we've learned about all the horrible things the FBI has done, you had a bunch of Republicans on the Hill who were trying to reward them with a massive new building, a really big increase in their budget. Why would they change anything they're doing when even the Republicans who know better are doing nothing to stop them? So I think, the budget should be used by Congress. Presidents, people who are running for president absolutely have to understand the seriousness of the problem. And they have to realize that this is not just a few bad apples. It's not just a few bad things. Like, even when the FBI has been doing some good things, their record of doing really awful things goes back decades.
Mollie, quick reaction to my suggestion. We've got federal civil service protections for many people. I would remove them for anyone working at the FBI and the Department of Justice. I think you ought to be able to fire anyone who does anything like this immediately. No Merit Systems Protection Board referral. What do you think about that?
Hugh, that is an excellent idea, and it shouldn't just be for the FBI. It should be across the board in executive agencies. We have almost a fourth branch of government in this bureaucracy that is unconstitutional, and there's nothing we can do so long as we can't fire them.
That's it. And maybe it is bigger than the Bureau, but starting with the Bureau, Schedule A lawyers can be thrown out tomorrow. But everybody else in the federal government, I'll come back and talk about it. Mollie Hemingway, always a pleasure talking to you. See her on Fox News. Follow her at the Federalist. Follow her on Twitter at MZ Hemingway. I'll be right back, America. I'm Hugh.